everybody. It's Liz Scott, and welcome to Open Mic Marketing. So this is our second session. We started last month, and I was super happy with all of the feedback that I received from the folks who attended our first call, and we're always getting new people joining, which is super exciting. So I know that there's some other folks that are waiting to join the call. So while we're waiting for everybody to get all settled in, let me just explain to you how this can work for you. So there's a couple of different ways that you can ask a question. You can see in your panel that you can actually raise your hand, and I will unmute you, and you have the opportunity to ask your question. Or you have always the option, if you don't want to actually come on live verbally, that you can type your question into the chat box, and then I will read your question aloud and answer you to the best of my ability. There's also folks who just join the call who want to listen in and don't really have a question themselves, but just interested in hearing some of the things that other entrepreneurs and small business owners are asking and what some of my responses to that are. So before I jump into your questions, I always like to give a little bit of background about myself for those of you who don't know me. And I know that most of you on the call have either seen me speak or you've gone onto my website, but I'll just give you the 30-second background. So I did spend 25 years as a marketing VP, and I worked for a number of Fortune 500 companies, as well as a number of tech startups. So really got the best of both worlds in terms of what the best practices are for large organizations with big marketing budgets, but then also sort of how to grow your business from employee number one all the way up. So left the corporate world and became an International Coaching Federation certified business coach. And like many of you, I now run my own business, which is Affinity Coach Consulting, the business fire starter. And I really specialize in helping entrepreneurs get their businesses to the next stage of growth. So whatever that looks like for you. So I work with organizations from startups all the way to 7 figures. I am an international best-selling author, speaker, and I am the founder of the Women's Entrepreneurial Network North. And now I am the founder of Open Mic Marketing. So I am super excited, as I said, to dive in and get your questions answered. So I'm going to open up the board now so I can see what your questions are. And so I'm going to start with Brian. Hey, Brian, how are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
Good. So you're on live. You want to ask me what your question is?
Yeah, I hear a lot about opt-ins, and I was wondering if you can explain what that is and why I need it.
Okay, perfect. Great. Thanks. So I'm going to put you back on mute. Okay, so what is an opt-in? I think I heard you say what is an opt-in, and can you explain why I need it? So great question, because, often we hear a lot of jargonese and we don't necessarily always understand what it is that people are talking about. So thanks so much for actually raising the question with me. So what is an opt-in? So an opt-in is a piece of information that you create that you usually post on your website that you want people to sign in for so that they actually can join your mailing list. So let me give you an example of that. So you'll often see on people's websites where a pop-up will appear and it will say, enter your name and email address and you can download this quick tips guide, or you can download my ebook, or you can get this one-page document that will help you to solve a problem that you know that your target audience will have. And so as a result of that, what you're really doing essentially is you're trying to build up your email list. Because at some point you want to be able to communicate with your target audience on a regular basis. And to do that, you want to build up your mailing list. And so creating the opt-in is a great way to provide value to your potential clients, to showcase some of your work and your thought leadership, and to get them interested a little bit more in terms of what it is that you do. So think of an opt-in really as being a bit of a teaser in terms of what it is that you do, but also it's a great way to build up your email list. So hopefully that answers your question. Okay, so next question that has come in is, if people sign up for something like a webinar, can we add their name to our mailing list, or do we specifically upfront, or do we have to specify upfront that they are being added to the list? Okay, so that's a great question, and the laws are pretty strict in Canada that you do have to get people's permission. But what you absolutely can do is one of two things. You can put in the copy of your webinar that by signing up for your webinar, they are actually agreeing to consent to become part of your mailing list, right? So you can just put that in the fine print saying, you know, thank you for signing up. As a result of signing up for this, you will be, in fact, entered as part of my email list. The second way that you can do that, if you don't necessarily feel comfortable doing that way, is that you can always follow up with them afterwards. And, you know, to a certain extent, I highly encourage this. So anybody who signed up for your webinar, you want to follow up with them so that you have another touch point. And also you'll get people who will sign up for your webinar and they may or may not actually attend live. Something might come up. So it's just a great way to touch base with them again. And you can simply ask them at that point, hey, you know, sorry you couldn't make it on my webinar. Here's the replay. By the way, I'd love for you to join my mailing list. Click here and enter your information. So that's a great question. And it is a bit tricky. You do have to be really careful when you are dealing with email in Canada because the laws are ever changing. So hopefully that answers your question. Okay, so next question is, a friend of mine suggested that I focus exclusively on building my business online. Does this make sense? Because I'm not really sure. So my answer to that is it really depends on what stage of business you're at. I mean, for me personally, I don't ever recommend that you do everything just by building an online presence. I really believe that face-to-face in the early stages, and I know a lot of you have heard me talk about this before, but face-to-face in the early stages is absolutely the best way to go, and always important to establish rapport and get that know, like, and trust factor going. You can enhance your network by trying to build your presence online. To me personally, I think it's fairly dangerous to do that because, first of all, it puts you into a world of competition. If all you're ever doing is online, you're in a global market then all of a sudden. Secondly, it, potentially helps you create material in a vacuum because people are not necessarily always going to be open and honest with you if they're hiding behind their computer screen. And it's much more complicated in a way to build up that know, like, and trust factor if you're only doing it on a virtual basis. Now, having said that, when you get into the latter stages of your business, so if you've been running your business for a number of years, or you've got a very large client base or a very large email list, then I absolutely encourage you to take more of your business online, because of course that leverages your business and also enables you to not have to spend so much time in person. But you're going to want to wait until you're in the latter stages of your business. And you're also going to want to wait until you have something that you have proven that works. So what do I mean by that? You know, we're often creating webinars or online programs or online documents, and it's really, you know, sort of the first 3, 4, 5 times you do it, you're really figuring out what works well and what maybe doesn't work quite as well. So, you know, part of that online process is really what really happened and what really is working. And once you've established some things that are working really well, then, you know, I would encourage you to take more of that and put it online. So hopefully, hopefully that answers your question. But I do get that question a lot about virtual versus physical. And I know that for a lot of people, they have other commitments and it's a bit of a challenge to get out into the physical world all the time, but certainly in the early stages of your business, that's where you want to spend the most amount of your time. Okay, so let's see what, okay, there's another question. So let me see what that is. Hey, Christine, I see that you have an unanswered question. Is that true, or is that just in the box mysteriously?
Is that me?
Yes, that's you, Christine Janes.
Oh, hi.
Hi.
You answered my question.
Oh, okay. So that was the initial question.
Yeah, the one about the using the webinar as a way to add people to your list. Yes.
Oh, good. Okay. Well, then, welcome to the call. It's great to have you on again, and I'm going to put you back onto mute.
Okay, thanks.
Perfect. Okay. All right. So let me go to the chat box and open up the next question. So the next question is, when is the best time to start sending out a newsletter? Do I even need one, or should I just blog instead? Interesting. Okay, so when is the best time to start sending out a newsletter? You know, I would say really when you've got something that is going to be meaningful to the people that you're going to be speaking to. So there's no right or wrong time to start. You do want to start to build your presence, and newsletters are a great way to be able to do this. But make sure that the vast majority of what you're putting in your newsletter is of value to your target audience. So the purpose, again, of doing a newsletter is twofold. Number one, you want to establish yourself as an expert in what it is that you do. So by putting tips and tricks or articles or lots of heavy, interesting content, that's really giving value to your target audience when you send out your newsletter. Also, you want to put a few things about what's going on. So if you've got upcoming events, speaking engagements, webinars, workshops, you know, anything that you think would be of interest. So it's a little bit of awareness and self-promotion, but the bulk of your newsletter should be content heavy about things that are interesting to your target audience. I wouldn't recommend doing a newsletter any more than once a month. I mean, I get absolutely inundated with newsletters, and if I get them more than once a month, I completely lose interest because it's just, it's over communication for me. But it's also a great way to start to build up your email list because, of course, you can always expand, right? You're expanding your mailing list all the time. So I would say start whenever you've got something interesting to say. And it doesn't really matter if you've got 10 people or you've got 10,000 people. As long as you're providing value, then go ahead and start your newsletter. I will say a word about that though, which is there are people out there that will try to sell you very complicated email software. It's expensive. It's a bit of overkill until you get around 3,000 to 5,000 people on your mailing list. I would use free email templates. MailChimp is one. There's a couple of others as well that you could be using so that you're not out of pocket as you're figuring out what newsletters work for you. So the second part of that question is, do I even need one or should I just blog instead? So, I get this a lot too where people are unclear of what the purpose of a blog versus an email is, email newsletter, and why they're doing that. And they really serve a couple of different purposes other than the fact that you're delivering great content in your newsletter, you're delivering great content in your blog, you're establishing yourself as a thought leader. So those are for both of those venues for you to do that. But the blog really is about search engine optimization. And so what does that mean? That's really so people can discover you through Google's search engine. So if they're looking for ABC and you've written a blog and you've used those exact words, then it may lead them ultimately to your blog. So the reason we blog is we want to give great information, but really what it's about is building up your online presence. So you certainly can take excerpts from your newsletter and put them into your blog, but they really do in fact serve two different purposes. So hopefully that is clear and I've answered your question. But these are great questions today, guys. So it's always interesting to me because I never really know quite what to expect. But these are certainly great questions. Okay, so the next question is, should I get an email address for my business or is my Gmail address okay when I'm just starting out? That is a great question. Great question. I see this a lot with people who are just starting their businesses. And that is predominantly that they will use sometimes their name, sometimes their business name at gmail.com. I always recommend that you get a professional business address. It really makes you look like a startup if you use your Gmail address, and it's not very much money. You can get GoDaddy to host an email address for you for very, very, very little investment, and it's absolutely worth it because it creates the impression when you use Outlook or something like that that you are a much larger organization than you really are. And I've seen the reverse, where people have fairly decent established businesses and they're still using their Gmail account. And I'm like, I don't understand that, because really what you want to do always is come across in the absolute most professional way that you can. So I would make the investment. It's GoDaddy.com for those of you who don't have a business email address. They will register the domain for you, and then you can certainly create your email address from there. But it really does give you a lot more credibility when you have your business email. All right, so let's go to the panel and see if anybody has any questions that they want to answer. Okay, everybody's being very shy today, so typing questions in. Okay, so the next one is everybody's talking about Snapchat and Instagram. Do I even need to use them because I'm not very good with social media? Okay, great question again. And I get a lot of social media discussion because, you know, small business owners aren't necessarily social media savvy, and social media can chew up your entire day. You can very easily go down a rabbit hole. You can very easily think that you need to be spending way more time on it than you do. But let's address the question specifically and talk about Snapchat and Instagram. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Snapchat, it's like a 30-second video that you show and then it disappears forever. And Instagram is, for all intents and purposes, pictures, and you can put little captions on them. So, you know, with all things social media, I always say start small and build yourself up so that you become familiar with that social media platform, and then you might want to move on to other social media platforms. So for most small business owners, depending on if you're B2B, business to business, or business to consumer, you probably only need LinkedIn or LinkedIn and Facebook. They're the big platforms. You can have video, you can have live video, you can have articles, you can have content, you can make lots of really great connections with them. And so Instagram and Snapchat, I would say if your business is highly visual, then you might want to take one of those. I mean, Snapchat really, it's not helpful for business owners because it goes away. Instagram, absolutely. If you have something that looks visually appealing, so you might want to do a before and after. So one of my clients is an interior designer and decorator. So she does a lot on Instagram because she shows the before and after pictures of what the room looked like before she put her magic into it and redecorated it, et cetera, et cetera. And then she shows the after. So I do encourage it if you feel comfortable with it and your business is highly visual. Home stagers are another group of people that often will show their before and after. And it's really impactful. I mean, you guys have all seen those weight loss commercials where it shows the before and after. So it very clearly indicates the transformation that you are able to create in your business. And you know, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So obviously, if you can have that visual, I think it would be awesome. Okay, so let me see if there's any other questions on the panel. And you guys are pretty quiet today. Okay, let me go back to the chat board. I think we're going to have a relatively quick call today. Either I'm talking really fast or you guys just don't have as many questions as you did last month. There's a lot of you who are listening but not necessarily asking questions. So the last question that I have is interesting, not really a marketing question, but this is one that I hear a lot. So I find that working from home, I can get easily distracted. Any suggestions for this? I do have some suggestions for that. And it really comes down to focus, which is kind of obvious. And a lot of us on the call are ladies. And ladies love to multitask. So I know it's super easy for us to think about popping a casserole in the oven or throwing a load of laundry in, and you know, that's okay, but that can chew up some time in your day when we really want to be focusing on moving our business forward. And so my suggestion is time blocking. So there's a couple of ways that you can do that. You can time block in your calendar. So you can say for the next half an hour or hour, I'm going to focus specifically on this one thing. I'm specifically going to focus on getting my invoicing done. Or I'm specifically going to focus on, editing my next newsletter, whatever that looks like. And if your focus tends to waver a little bit more than that, set a timer on your phone and say, okay, for the next 20 minutes or 30 minutes, I'm not going to answer any emails. I'm not going to answer any calls. I'm just kind of buckle down and do this. And then when the timer goes off, let yourself go and, put the washing in the washing machine, et cetera, et cetera. Because when you're intensely focused for that 20 minutes or half an hour that you're working, chances are that you're going to be way more productive, right? And email is a big, big time thief. So people are constantly checking their email, their instant messenger, their text messages, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But every time you do that, and I know, guys, I know it's hard not to because you want to see what's the coolest new thing that popped into your inbox. But every time you do that, you're distracting yourself and you're pulling yourself away. So those are my recommendations for that question. So really just batch process and focus as much as you possibly can. So let me just go quickly down to chat and see what else is happening there. Okay, so I'm just going to open it up. Those are all the questions that I had either verbally or that people have typed into the chat box. So let me just open it up really quickly again and see if there's any last questions that any of you guys on the call have for me. And or if you want to type another question into the chat box, that's fine too. So I'll just give you another couple of seconds to do that. Here's the other thing while I have you guys, as you're thinking about if there's another question. You can always send me, and I had this actually happen by a woman who was on the call last month but wasn't able to be on the call today. So she emailed me and said, is it okay if I ask my question? And she was actually the one who asked the question about the Gmail address. Is it okay if I ask the question beforehand and you will answer it on the call, even though I'm not able to be on the call? So that's also an option for any of you guys that are interested. You can always email me your questions beforehand, and I will definitely answer them while I'm on the call. Okay, well, I don't see any more questions. As I said, we are constantly building our audience, so I would love it if you could share Open Mic Marketing with some of your other entrepreneurial friends and your entrepreneurial groups. We're not going to take the full hour today, but I know that in February I've already got lots of people lined up, so we will have a significantly bigger group at that point in time. So thanks so much for everybody. That's Open Mic Marketing for January. And thanks so much for showing up today, and hopefully I will talk to everybody soon. Take care.